Hello, I'm Lori Feathers, and welcome back to the Big Book Project. We are together reading Roberto Bolaño's 2666, and we're this week reading the second of three sections total of the chapter in the book called The Part About the Crimes. It's a rather long chapter, so we're taking 3 weeks to read it. And I wanted to address today the issue that just becomes, I think, more and more apparent as you delve into the part about the crimes. We certainly have been kind of feeling this throughout the book, but it becomes almost impossible to not confront this big looming, I think, theme of the novel once we get into the second week's reading of the part about the crimes. And that is the fact that the perpetrators of these crimes are, in a very real respect, large segments of this society in Santa Teresa. Certainly, there are murderers of these women. Again, serial femicides, hundreds and hundreds of women dying in the 1990s in Santa Teresa, a border town in Mexico. But there's kind of a larger societal rot here, a complicity, a complacency. It's kind of a collective perpetration or bringing about of these murders. I feel it's a little more than just saying that segments of society are allowing them to happen. It's that, but it's also more. It's the way that certain people consider human life, especially female life, especially poor women's lives. And again, a lot of the misogyny that we've talked about in previous chapters. And so I just want to kind of dig down a little bit into some of these layers of society that seem to be complicit in the murders. As you know, we talked about the woman La Santa, and she has started working with this women's group called the Women of Sonora for Democracy and Peace. And she brings them on Ronaldo's TV show with her, and they speak out against a climate of impunity, the laxity of the police, corruption. They call it an unsustainable situation, and they proclaim that there's no respect for human rights and the law in Santa Teresa. Certainly, we feel that. I'm going to talk about the media, the guards at the Santa Teresa prison, the police, the wealthy businessmen, and then also just the everyday people in Santa Teresa, and talk about how some of their actions and their attitudes about these women and their deaths are perpetrating the crisis. First of all, the media. In this section, we'll see the arrest of a German American named Klaus Haas, and he's arrested for one woman's murder in particular. And when he is arrested, it's basically the type of situation where he's put in jail, and the prisoners kind of treat him as a celebrity, And unfortunately, the media does too. He manages through his lawyer, and we can assume the with the collusion of the prison guards, to call a press conference, and people fly in from Mexico City, all of the press corps from the province of Sonora are there, and and he's able to kind of hold court and proclaim his innocence, while everyone is just there, uh, paying attention to him, waiting for what he might say with bated breath. At the same time that the victims' families are disrespected, mistreated. Another instance of the media, or we get a sense of it, is with the TV personality Ronaldo, again, who I just mentioned. But he's threatened with termination for having the women of Sonora for Democracy and Peace come on to the show. His station manager calls him an agitator and says that he's going to fire him, or threatens to fire him, because of that fact. So in this way, the media is certainly not helping with an investigation, and you could say they're trying to stop the justice for being obtained here for the women. Another incident happens in the prison, though, that kind of um, implicates the media, and that is when Klaus Haas talks to his lawyer about um, the brutal murder of some other fellow prisoners that I'll talk about it in a little while. But his lawyer says that these prisoners were killed for money and because of money. And Klaus Haas says something to the effect of, well, why doesn't the outside world know about this? And she calls him naive and asleep. And she says that, of course, the outside world knows about this, but the media is discreet, the most discreet of all. So that's kind of an eerie kind of tone about the way the media is being used, and is not proactive in trying to help investigate and figure out what's going on here. Next, I'll talk about the prison guards. This is a kind of harrowing lot of people. They watch on as these prisoners that I just referred to are murdered inside the prison, and they basically, we believe, get paid off by the victim's family, who are actually, in this case, wealthy. The victim being a 17-year-old named Estrella Ruiz Sandoval. And these four men are arrested, and then the prison guards just let prisoners that are affiliated with our narcotics gang to go ahead and have their way with them, and it involves rape and just really brutal murders. Of course, we know, and we've talked about the fact that the police are a mixed bag here in terms of how dedicated they are and committed, and how much integrity they have in solving these murders. There's a lot of sick jokes about the victims. A lot of the cops comment that this victim must have been a whore because she liked to go to clubs and hooked up with guys. Other victims, one that they find, and they can't really tell much about her body because it's been so decomposed, but but she's part of her that is not decomposed is a hand, and it's the fingernails are painted red, and they call her a whore because, or assume that she was a whore because she's got red nail polish. Um, and then at the very top of the police, the chief Negrete is certainly corrupt. We find out in this week's reading. He really very much wants to keep the murders hushed up. It's a little hard to do when the body count is so high. Um, but he meets with and plots with the mayor of Santa Teresa and two of the big um, big drug families in the area, because they all kind of are on the take with the drugs and the prostitution. Um, so the police aren't really very helpful here, and and I think that we're going to see some of the police kind of break out of this horrible mentality, and kind of be a little bit more proactive and effectual. At least I hope so. There seems some glimmer of hope in this week's reading about that, but we'll just have to wait and find out. And then there's just some disturbing comments from everyday people. One of the reporters from Mexico City that comes up for the press conference that Klaus Haas holds at the prison, he is named Sergio Gonzalez, and we met him in a previous week, I think last week. And he spends the night with a prostitute, and he starts talking to her about the femicides in Santa Teresa, and he says something along the lines of, you don't seem much interested, or you don't seem very affected. And she very emphatically tells him that she's not like them. They are workers. They're workers at the maquiladoras. They are not like her at all. And she says it in a very dismissive and demeaning way. And then we also have, of course, Alvaro Campos, who's Inspector Juan de Dios's love interest. And, he's kind of in a pillow talk sort of way, talking to her about the femicides. He's getting increasingly, it seems, upset about the fact that they can't solve them, increasingly disturbed and losing sleep because of all the bodies that he's seen and how they are so mutilated. And in response, she just seems to be worried about getting old and wrinkles and a lot of very vain and superfluous things. So putting all of those elements of the society together, you really get the sense that that not a lot of people are not, and not the right people, are caring about what's happening here. There are voices like the women of Sonora for democracy and peace, like La Santa, but there aren't nearly enough of them. And it's hard to understand right now how this will all kind of turn out in an even semi-hopeful way when there's so much there's so much riding against kind of healing here that needs to happen on every level in order for people to really try to effectively solve the problem. And last week, you might remember in the video and also in some of the Substack comments, I talked about the banality of evil, this phrase that the philosopher Hannah Arendt coined to talk about fascism and Nazism under Hitler. And again, it's kind of how evil becomes commonplace and in some ways acceptable in people's minds. Um, and I think Roberto Bolaño thought a lot about fascism and Hitler's rise and the society at large, not just the Nazis, but all of the segments of society that were complicit in perpetrating the crimes. And I think that he is trying to paint for us here in this city in Mexico, um, in the 1990s, something that in a lot of ways isn't so dissimilar from what happened uh, in Germany in the 30s and 40s. Bolaño wrote two books directly kind of addressing Germany and fascism. One is a novella called Nazi Literature in the Americas, and the other novella is called The Third Reich. I've not read either of those, but I'd be interested hearing from readers on the Substack, what these books are addressing and what you took away from them, and whether you thought there were similarities with 2666. I'm I'm thinking that there might be, but I kind of feel as we get through this book that Bolaño, as he's writing it, is processing the tragedy of humanity in Germany in the 30s and 40s and kind of giving us a window into similar mentalities in more of our current contemporary society, and how they can be perpetrated and kind of, again, more than facilitate, but actually be complicit in letting these crimes happen, and actually in the harm that's being done to society. So those are a few things that I wanted to talk with you all about today, and I appreciate you for listening in. I appreciate you for being part of the Big Book Project, and I hope that you will tell us about your reading experience on Substack, and I'll see you soon.